Cohen In. Now, here is today's program.
Thank you so much for being together with us. Rabbi Daniel Lappin, that's me, my wife Susan. We're thrilled to be together with you. And we very much hope that the time you are good enough to invest with us is repaid to you in abundance and blessing. And that is very much what we focus on and what we aim to be able to do together with you here on Ancient Jewish Wisdom. Look, we're very aware, as I think everyone is, that making a living is tough. It really is. And sometimes times out there can be great, and it's still hard. Other times out there can be very tough, and you may be doing something that's going very well, or it might be very difficult. But whatever it is, there are principles that are permanent, and there are truths that are timeless, that you may not know, or maybe you only know them in your head, but not in your heart, and you haven't embraced them in your life. And in so doing, you're making things harder for yourself than they need to be. Look, it's well known that the Jewish people, whether in countries and times of hideous oppression and cruelty, or whether in blessed places like the United States of America, where Jews have lived in tranquility and prosperity greater than anywhere else in the last 2,000 years, it doesn't matter. Jews have always been disproportionately good with money. It's not an accident. And it isn't because they eat chicken soup, and it isn't because they're circumcised, and it's not because they're smart. None of these things are true explanations. The true explanation is very simple, and that is that embedded in the brilliance of the Bible are countless strategies, steps, countless spiritual maneuvers that we all need to understand. It's not just for the Jewish people, it's for everybody. And first and foremost among these things is an understanding of what money is. After all, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about trying to make it a little easier for you to obtain the money that you need in your life to bless God and to bless those around you. And in order to do that, you need to know the strategies and the things that you need to do. I mean, after all, if a complete newcomer tried to bake, what's a hard cake to bake? I mean, they're all hard to me, but something
to me,
that
lemon meringue pie. My lemon meringue pies always fall.
You make wonderful lemon meringue pies, Susan.
No, I make a lemon meringue cake because my lemon meringue pies fail, so I've now started making
Well, if that's the failure,
no,
then,
the cake is a success.
Then what
I've
it's meant to be
pies,
must be like
actually.
heaven. I can't even imagine. But, all right, fine. Susan says that a lemon meringue pie is hard to make. Well, imagine somebody like me stepping into a kitchen and saying, I think I'm going to make a lemon meringue pie today. Not going to do too well, right? Or if I decided I was going to walk into a really bad part of the world and I was going to rely on a book I read last week on self-defense, unarmed combat. It's not going to work. Or how about if I decided to make an omelet? Or if I decided to suddenly dance for a ballet company. It's preposterous. I would be like a rheumatoid elephant. If you don't...
Sorry, that was funny.
You didn't have to laugh at that. Was that a laughter of
well,
agreement?
No, it was an it was just a funny word picture,
okay.
mind picture.
Well, that was meant to be. But no, the point is that to do anything without knowing how to do it is sheer folly. And the trouble is that many of us embark on the serious and, yes, godly business of creating wealth without knowing how to do it. Now, I'm not talking about getting rid of debt. That's a very important and essential function. But that's not what we're talking about. For that, I want you to study with my good friend and brother, Dave Ramsey. And I'm not talking about how to make wise investments. I'm talking about getting enough money in the first place in order to make wise investments. We're talking about making more money. As a matter of fact, we were very direct about this in naming one part of our income abundance set. We called it Boost Your Income, because we're talking about boosting your income.
And people can get that from TCT, which we're so grateful they give us this opportunity to do the show, and they provide this. This is one of our teachings which TCT provides, so you can get that. Can I jump in, because you know something you've done? I mean, you have done seminars literally 6 hours, 8 hours for companies. We have a book, we have 3 hours worth of audio CD on the topic, and we've only skimmed the surface. So can we hone in on one very specific? So just this, during this show, let's give one lesson I'd like to give.
Well, here is the first one, and I really do think this is terribly important, and I think I have an idea of which one you want to home in on, but let me just clarify this one, if you don't mind, because I really do think that this is the foundational principle. Look, there are a lot of you who are not prospering because you feel that making money is taking money. A lot of you are not earning your God-ordained wealth because deep down you feel that it is somewhat unseemly, that it's inappropriate. Because if you are acquiring money, there must be somebody else who is losing money. This is critical. If you believe that, you are doomed to having a shortage of money for the rest of your life.
Can I jump in and say something? Because I think when people don't have food on the table, they don't think making enough money to get food on the table is bad. But we live in a society of envy. And there is a 10th commandment, which is lo tachmod, which is do not covet. And that is a thought. It's not saying don't steal. It's not saying don't take something from somebody else. It's saying don't think. And in our society, anytime you hear people say, oh, he makes too much, that corporate CEO, they shouldn't make so much. This is a tax that should only be on wealthy people. That is an anti-biblical statement that is training you to be jealous. And so you may say, well, I think it's great for me to get enough money to have food on the table or to pay my child's medical bills, but that guy, he gets way too much. If you think getting way too much is possible, now, there are obviously bad ways to get way too much. I'm not saying that it's automatically virtuous, but if you think that there's a top limit at which point you become somebody who has too much, you probably will not have enough to put food on your table. Can you help me? You know what I'm trying to say?
No, you're saying it very effectively.
Because I don't think anybody says, oh, me having enough to pay my rent is too much. That they don't think, but look, there's a jealousy.
Only an animal can be said to have enough. And that's why it is. We should be satisfied with our lot. There's no question about it. You shouldn't walk around with a constant unhappiness and a constant dissatisfaction. That's different. But you see, if you say how much food does an animal need, almost any farmer will tell you exactly how much food a cow needs. And that's what he gives the cow. And you don't see a lot of overweight cows around. You don't see a lot of overweight lions around. With animals, it is different from human beings because we human beings are touched by God. God created us in his image, which means there's a little part of us that is infinite and limitless. And yes, we do have infinite and limitless desires. I'm sure you remember when you were 16 years old or 17 years old and you said to yourself, if only I could have this amount of money every month, whatever that money. Well, a few years later, you were getting that. Did you settle back and say, well, finally achieved my goal? No, you have new goals. All of that is positive and good, and that is healthy. But the idea of saying, I don't have enough, but other people have got more than enough, you can't say that. It's not true, because each and every human being has his own goals and aspirations and his own drive towards limitlessness. And that's one of the reasons that one of the worst mistakes that a company can make with its sales team is to put caps on their earnings. I've seen companies that have made this mistake, and I've advised them to correct it, and when they have corrected it, they've shot forward in corporate profits. The mistake they make is they discover that the top tier of sales professionals earn more than a manager, more than a director, more than the CEO. And they say, we can't have that, and they put in caps and limits. And because a top-rate sales professional, and it's a wonderful profession, but a top-rate sales professional needs to know that the sky's the limit. because he was created in the image of God. Don't cap people's earnings. Don't cap your own earnings mentally by limiting it. And one of the ways we do this, by the way, is make the mistake of thinking that money is physical and not spiritual. Many of us make this horrible mistake of thinking that money is physical. And so just as this Bible is here in front of me and it's a physical object, and if Susan were to take it away from me, then I wouldn't have it. That's a general rule of physical objects. The general rule of physical objects is that if you have it, I don't. If I have it, you don't have it. So, imagine I take this, imagine there's a shortage of Bibles, which thank God there isn't. But if I take this Bible, well, I guess somebody else doesn't have one. But how about if I tell you the divine ideas and thoughts that are found in this Bible? Do I now have less? No, this is like you coming to light your candle from my candle. You now have light. Have I got any less light? Of course not. As a matter of fact, there's more light in the room because your candle is burning now as well. We have to understand that money is actually like that as well. That when you serve another human being and you therefore have more money in your bank account, whether that person you serve is a customer or it's a client, or it's your boss, or it's a relative, or whatever it is. But somebody put a dollar bill or $100 bill in your pocket because whatever it was you did for them was worth more. Serving other human beings is absolutely critical. And you've got to realize that the act of making money is virtuous in and of itself. If you never gave anything to charity again, you've still served humanity by making that money in the first place. It's one of the reasons I hate the idea of hearing that wealthy people make a charitable donation and everyone says, oh, how wonderful, they're giving back to society. Excuse me? What does that mean they were doing to society when they made the money in the first place? If giving charity is giving back, then when I make money, am I taking? Terrible, terrible, wrong-headed thinking. When you make money, you're not taking anything from anybody. You are adding to the common good. And so you've got to overcome this idea of feeling guilty about making money.
Or jealous of others who do make it, that if they made less, you would somehow have more. No, everybody has less. It's a very, and because society is so intent on causing jealousy. It really is. We're a society that is somehow
Don't
the media, the
fall into that
government,
trap.
politicians are just intent on getting us to be jealous of other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
so
anti-biblical.
Let's now move to the next step, which is you need to think of yourself as being in business. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, I'm not in business. I don't have a business. I'm not a boss. I'm not a CEO. I'm looking for a job. That's all I want. Or I'm in a job. I drive a bus. Or I shine shoes at the airport. Or that's all I am. No. You really have to think of yourself as being in business.
I was going to say, can we look, because one of the things that we do, which we really enjoy doing, is sharing wisdom that comes out of the Hebrew language, because the Hebrew language is God's language. It's the language in which he gave the Bible, and and the Hebrew language is unlike any other language that you can study. Because God invented it, and other languages are man-made. Hebrew is a godly language. And so there are things that happen in Hebrew which do not happen in any other language. One of which is that in Hebrew, if there are two words, and those two words, we're not talking modern Hebrew, which has words like televizia. Guess what that is in Israel, right? If you have a televizia, you're not going to find televizia or television in the Bible.
Oh, here's another Hebrew word used in modern Israel today. This is a tough one. Let's see if our audience can guess what this Hebrew word means in modern Hebrew. Telephone.
No, I don't think they'll get that. I think that's too tough.
Tough one.
Tough
Yeah.
one.
All right, we'll give
but
it to you
if a
later.
word is found in the 5 books of Moses or in the prophets, and it has 2 meanings, the same word has 2 meanings, that is not because God ran out of words and he couldn't think of a new word. It is that you are meant to go and look and say these 2 concepts are related. And you made up a story about a person who was flush with money, and then he had to go help his child flush the toilet.
Here is how it was.
Okay.
I made it up at a casino table.
You don't go to casino tables.
I know, and I don't know too much about it either, but I know enough.
I hope no one in the audience does either, so whatever you say will be fine.
The lady croupier, I think, is that the word? The dealer,
Okay.
or the dealer, said, "Oh, you've got a royal flush," to the card player. And he said, "Thank you, you are most beautiful." At which point...
She socked him.
No.
Oh.
Her cheeks...
Oh, flushed.
Flushed.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she got a flush on her cheeks. And just then, the man's little kid, and I don't know what a little kid's doing in a casino, but a little kid ran up and said, "Daddy, I've gone to the bathroom, can you come help me flush?" And so the card player put down his cards flush with the edge of the table and went off. I think that's about all the flushes I had.
You know what? John Steinbeck or Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, we may not be, but you get the idea of the story, that the word flush was used here 4 or 5 times, and each time it had a separate meaning, and we would be absolutely wasting our time to try to say why, when your face flushes, is it the same word as a royal flush, which is the same thing you do to a toilet. However, in Hebrew, the whole point of what we're trying to say is, in Hebrew, you have to ask that question. And so we have a word early on in Genesis. What chapter is it, Daniel?
Which one are you thinking of?
About Noah, when Noah
Yes.
gets drunk.
It's chapter 9. It's chapter 9, verse 20.
Would you read it in Hebrew, please?
I absolutely will. And we know you don't read Hebrew, obviously, but we want you to hear the music of the Hebrew language. There's something really significant about that. And so we know you don't read Hebrew, but here's what the verse sounds like in Hebrew, which is, it's really got a beautiful sound to it, especially if I could read it more musically than I'm going to. Vayachel Noach ish ha'adama vayita karem vayasht min hayayin vayishkar. Genesis 9, verse 20. And Noah was a man of the earth, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became intoxicated.
And the word for intoxicated?
Shikur.
It's composed, the root of being intoxicated, being drunk, is a 3-letter root with a sh sound, a k sound, and a r sound. Now, you know how in English a C could be a k as in cat or a C as in civilization? There are a number of letters in Hebrew which have 2 sounds. And the letter that forms an SH sound, a shin, can also make a s sound. It's called a sin then. The letter that forms a k sound, a kaf, can also form a ch sound, a chaf. It's exactly the same letter. So you have 3 letters, a shin, a kaf, and a resh, making the sound shikor, or a drunk. Later on in the Bible, there's a rule which says that if you have somebody working for you for an hourly wage, a daily laborer, you may not withhold their payment. Now, lots of us work and we get paid every other week, we get paid once a month, but if you have someone who's working and the agreement is they're a daily laborer, they must get paid at the end of every day, you may not neglect to pay them at that daily
And
rate.
a quick shout out here to the genius production department of TCT Television.
Who's going to show this?
Because right now people are seeing on their screen the exact letters and words we're talking about, and it would be so hard to
Without
get
it.
this message and this lesson clearly across for you without this incredible
So
behind-the-scenes work. So a big thank you
that
there.
hourly or daily laborer is called a sachir. It's exactly the 3, sounds different, shikor, sachir, sounds different, but it's exactly the same root word. And since this is God who chose these words, he is telling us, he's giving us a message. He's saying, I want you to understand what being drunk has to do with being an hourly laborer. And the answer is not that hourly laborers get drunk. But what is the answer?
The answer is to recognize that there is identifying the commonality within these three letters that make up that Hebrew root, which can either mean intoxicated or employed. In both cases, you can't do whatever you like. Think of the policeman who stops the driver who's had too much to drink, and he says to him, "You're going to jail unless you can walk down that straight line." Now at this point, the drunk desperately desires to walk the straight line. Can't do it. When you're drunk, you cannot do what you really want. When you're, let's say you possess certain secrets that you know should not be let out, and you really don't want to let them out. When you're drunk, you can't any longer do what you want, which is to keep the secret. You're going to talk. You're going to say things you regret.
You're out of control of you're not in control of your own self.
Similarly, when you're an employee, somebody pays me. I cannot do what I want. I can't.
Portion. And worship God with the first portion, because where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. The children of Israel come to the promised land. They cross the Jordan River. The first city, there's this massive city state.
Even more than that, it means that I cannot take a long time to say my grace after meals, because in Deuteronomy we're told you shall eat and you shall be satisfied and you shall bless the Lord your God. So we all know that we should say a grace and a blessing to God before we eat, but Deuteronomy tells us we should also thank God after we eat. And I might decide I want to spend 20 minutes. I really want to be very holy and very pious. And I so powerfully feel gratitude to God for this wonderful meal I've just enjoyed. I want to go ahead now and take a long time to thank God. As a matter of fact, ancient Jewish wisdom says, do it on your own time, pal, not while you're being paid. There is a special, very brief, short, quick summary of the grace after meals to be said when you are being paid. You can't take a lot of time away from your employer.
We are running out of time, and I don't think we've really even reached the final point.
Go for it.
Because the point is that the shorter period for which you get paid, the less ability you have to control yourself. If you are on an annual salary, you know what? You can take off a day and go do something that is important to you because you make it up. In other words, the value you're giving is such that it's a larger thing. If you're an hourly worker, well, if you miss an hour, you don't get paid for that hour. And the idea is not that you should not be an hourly worker, not that you should not be a daily worker. In your mind, you have to think of yourself as in business for yourself, in control of yourself. And help me, we have so little time, and this is such a vital point. Maybe I am working for an hourly wage.
Yes, I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that you drive a bus for the local transit company. Let's imagine that you serve coffee for a national coffee chain whose name I will not mention because they are not advertisers on our program. Or let's imagine that you're employed by a large airplane manufacturer. It doesn't matter. You will then listen to us talking now, and you're saying to yourself, what are they talking? I'm not in business. I'm an employee. And what we're saying is change your mindset. Start thinking of yourself as being in business. How does that work? Well, you are an employee of the coffee chain and you make coffee, that's right. But think about it as you are in the business of supplying customers with coffee. You happen at the moment to only have one customer, which is the coffee chain that employs you. But think about that. That will help you become knowledgeable and a specialist and expand your usefulness because you're in the coffee business. Right now, you just have one employer, but
you might even be in the customer service business. You happen to, one thing you provide customers is coffee, but you start thinking in a different way, which is what else can I supply? Because I'm only working 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. I have other skills, though, that I develop in serving.
I drive a bus for the transit company. I'm in the business of transport. And right now I only have one customer. But what's to stop me starting a weekend job taking people who need transport elsewhere? Maybe elderly people need to go shopping. Whatever it is, think of yourself as being in business. And that way you can also realize that when it comes time to ask for a raise, there is a certain way of doing that. You've got to make sure you are delivering more value, and you've got to make your customers see that you're delivering more value. In this particular program, what we've been focusing on is getting accustomed to this idea that you must change who you see yourself as in order to change your financial fortunes. And that is
You're
very
not a
appropriate.
puppet being controlled. You're not.
Stop
You are
thinking of
in
yourself as
control
being
of
controlled
yourself.
by other people. You are in charge of your destiny. You and the Lord who loves you and wants to see you serve human beings, to serve his other children. You mustn't be surprised. Please, don't be surprised when God blesses you with abundance, when you focus not selfishly on what you need, not selfishly on what you want, but you focus on serving God's other children, where you focus obsessively on finding ways to help other people. Don't be surprised that God's response to you is the enormous blessing of financial abundance.
Thank you for watching Ancient Jewish Wisdom with Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Now, here is today's program.
Thank you so much for being together with us. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, that's me, my wife Susan. We're thrilled to be together with you. And we very much hope that the time you are good enough to invest with us is repaid to you in abundance and blessing. And that is very much what we focus on and what we aim to be able to do together with you here on Ancient Jewish Wisdom. Look, we're very aware, as I think everyone is, that making a living is tough. It really is. And sometimes times out there can be great and it's still hard. Other times out there can be very tough, and you may be doing something that's going very well, or it might be very difficult. But whatever it is, there are principles that are permanent, and there are truths that are timeless that you may not know, or maybe you only know them in your head, but not in your heart, and you haven't embraced them in your life. And in so doing, you're making things harder for yourself than they need to be. Look, it's well known that the Jewish people, whether in countries and times of hideous oppression and cruelty, or whether in blessed places like the United States of America,
No,
then,
the cake is a success.
then what
I've
it's
given
meant
up
to
on
be
pies,
must be like
actually.
heaven. I can't even imagine. But, all right, fine. Susan says that a lemon meringue pie is hard to make. Well, imagine somebody like me stepping into a kitchen and saying, I think I'm going to make a lemon meringue pie today. Not going to do too well, right? Or if I decided I was going to walk into a really bad part of the world and I was going to rely on a book I read last week on self-defense, unarmed combat. It's not going to work. Or how about if I decided to make an omelet? Or if I decided to suddenly dance for a ballet company? It's preposterous. I would be like a rheumatoid elephant. If you don't, for the Jewish people, it's for everybody. And first and foremost among these things is an understanding of what money is. After all, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about trying to make it a little easier for you to obtain the money that you need in your life to bless God and to bless those around you. And in order to do that, you need to know the strategies and the things that you need to do. I mean, after all, if a complete newcomer tried to bake, what's a hard cake to bake? I mean, they're all hard to me, but something
To me,
that
lemon meringue pie. My lemon meringue pies always fall.
You make wonderful lemon
No, I
meringue
make a lemon
pie,
meringue
Susan.
cake because my lemon meringue pies fail. So I've now started making
Well, if that's
lemon
the
meringue.
failure where Jews have lived in tranquility and prosperity greater than anywhere else in the last 2,000 years, it doesn't matter. Jews have always been disproportionately good with money. It's not an accident. And it isn't because they eat chicken soup, and it isn't because they're circumcised, and it's not because they're smart. None of these things are true explanations. The true explanation is very simple, and that is that embedded in the brilliance of the Bible are countless strategies, steps, countless spiritual maneuvers that we all need to understand. It's not just